Be awesome.
Yeah, visible.
Okay, awesome. Hi guys, welcome to the preliminary workshop or basics of Asian Parliamentary Debating workshop. I'm Nandinaey. I'll be here like just talking to you and getting to explain to you all of the necessary things which someone who's just entering the circuit or the activity of judging itself, what they should be familiar with. Note that this is not the most comprehensive sort of adjudication workshop. This is just for you to get your basics clear. And at the end, I'll have a list of some other resources that you should access and things you should do if you want to continue your journey into adjudication or how you can get started into it. But cool, with that out of the way, we can start with the session. Great. So I just quickly want to go over what we're going to cover today. There are like largely six things that we're going to see. The first thing is understanding the idea of the ordinary intelligent voter. So what is the sort of persona that you must take account of when you're going ahead and judging debates. The second is in general just about tracking and note taking and how you can actually go ahead and ensure that when you're sitting down and judging the debate, you're like paying attention and how you can jot down the content that the teams are throwing at you. The third is about assessing arguments, how you like assess analysis, assertions, weighing, clashes, and all of that. So this is three and four. And fifth and sixth is the most like important, I'd say, which is the like OA, giving the oral adjudication, since this is, I think, the most prominent or the most visible part of your job, like the OA that you give. So I think we are going to spend significant amount of time on that, and then we're just going to quickly go over some common mistakes that people make so that we can avoid them in the future. Great. So the first idea, and if you guys want to take notes, this is when you start. So the first idea is on the ordinary intelligent voter, and the basic understanding that we are going to have after the end of this segment is just about the sort of mindset that you enter the room with. Cool. So I just want you to like look at the screen. It's not going to be a lot of content on the screen. I'm going to be talking about the content, and you can just listen to what I'm saying and make notes through that, or just pay attention to that. The PPT is just there for your reference later. So, what is an ordinary intelligent voter? The ordinary intelligent voter is someone who basically reads the headlines of the newspapers. They don't go ahead and majorly have specific information about specific things. They are open to being convinced from both sides of whatever debate they're listening to. So the first idea is that you are just a very open person and you don't have certain biases that you can have. So you don't have political leanings, you don't have like any sort of biases that you like would generally have in life, and you probably also the extension to this is that you don't have opinions of yourself other than whatever the team is telling you. That's the basic idea. So the four things that are written is just informed, not expert. So you read newspapers, follows logic. So obviously teams are going to tell you things in a logical order. So you follow that order. No political leaning. So you can be persuaded by equally good left wing or right wing arguments, and the impacts that these arguments then have must be justified. And lastly, and most importantly, and this is something that a lot of judges skip out on, is that you can be emotionally persuaded. The reason for this is imagine an average human being, right? Like an average intelligent voter or an ordinary intelligent voter is just an average person. They can be emotionally persuaded. Rhetoric and appeals to emotion are something which are like capable of convincing you to certain points, or like to go ahead and you know change your decisions or your opinions, or at least influence your opinions on the basis of whatever they are saying. So suppose if I am making a very emotional argument to an average person, that person can get convinced by it. So just ensure that you're not just blanketly ignoring all of the rhetoric or the delivery or the impacting that the teams are going to give you, and this is something which you should keep in mind. Cool. So quickly then going over like what biases you can be affected by and how you can like avoid them. So the first thing is that you should avoid using personal knowledge that the teams couldn't reasonably know. So suppose you're like coming from an engineering background, you must have a lot of education and a lot of knowledge about explicitly things that you are taught. And if a debate comes up that you're judging, which is about say like So suppose you're a computer science student and the debate is about the most revolutionary tech in AI. Teams generally aren't aware about absolutely everything, just like you. And so they might be not aware of some things that you might be aware of. So they may make claims which you know are factually incorrect, but because the other team has not called them out, I don't think you can go ahead in good faith and like discredit their claim if it is actually like well mechanized. The reason for this is that this is basically just a way of inserting yourself into the debate, and you shouldn't do this because the debate is not about what you know, it's about what you can get convinced through if you don't have prior knowledge of the subject itself. So this is the reason as to why I'm saying that you shouldn't use personal knowledge that teams don't reasonably know. The second is that give little credit to appeals or emotion or authority alone. Note that like appeals to authority or appeals to emotion and appeals to just moral structures in general is something which teams will do. They will say that, oh, XYZ is just morally correct and XYZ should just morally happen. And they're going to appeal to certain like utilitarian or deontological structures like that or theories like that. And I want you to catch these sort of appeals and not give in to them. The reason for this is that unless and until a team is able to convince you or speaker is able to convince you that you shouldn't that you should believe them with respect to the mech they are offering you and the sort of analysis that they are giving you, unless they and until they're able to do this after they make the appeal, you shouldn't just blanketly go ahead and opt into learning and listening to what they're saying. The third is then about just presuming background about culture and like cultural background and geographical background. I think a lot of you guys are going to have exposure to a lot of international debates and circuits where people come from a very diverse set of cultures and locations and ideologies and like certain dialect like certain affectations of their voice. So please ensure that you are being respectful and you're being like open to the ideas that other people bring which you may not be familiar with. And then the next thing is just an extension of the previous thing, which is that like don't prefer styles of speaking that match your personal preference. I like people who speak very slowly, who are calm, but there are other people who just like talk very fast and they are not going to slow down even if they have to catch trains or whatever. So like you need to ensure that whatever your personal speaking style is, you don't just like think that that's the best style. Different people speak differently, obviously. So you need to ensure that you have that in your head whenever you go ahead and like enter a debate. The the last two things are also then like intertwined, which is about like treat both left and right wing arguments equally. They both need justifications. Now understand that this doesn't mean if someone gives you an extremist argument you should also take that at face value and not impose some sort of moral understanding to it, obviously. Because if some people say that, oh, rights for a certain group should not exist because that's what right wing policy in a certain country says, I don't think that's something you should accept simply because on a basic human understanding and moral understanding you know that that's incorrect. So don't also just lean into the extreme of not having biases. Not having biases is like does not mean that you totally abandon moral compasses and you totally abandon the sort of morality that a normal person or an average intelligent person might have. So you are an average person, sure, who does not have biases, but you are also an average intelligent person. So I think most intelligent people are able to have basics of morality like well defined, and they are able to go ahead and catch the ideas of, oh, what something, whether something is right or whether something is wrong. So I think that's the basic idea of the last two things. um, so before we go forward with that, like with the next section, does anyone have any questions regarding what we have previously discussed? If so, you can maybe just drop them in chat. We'll take a few seconds. Hi, can you repeat the second thing to avoid on that slide? Okay, second thing to avoid. Yeah, give little credit to appeals to emotion or authority alone. So appeals to emotion and appeals to authority are two different things. An appeal to an emotion might look like, oh, like, or like, wait, so an appeal to authority might look like, oh, XYZ is a very authoritative figure in a country, and whatever decrees that this figure passes or this institution passes is something which is like extremely correct inherently. This is an appeal to authority. The second idea is an appeal to emotion that, oh, look at look at the mistreatment of, or like look at the treatment that certain institutions offer to certain people, and that treatment is inherently flawed. This appeal to emotion can be clarified with an understanding of, let's say, the criminal justice system. So assume the debate is about, oh, whether or not um, whether or not people who commit like heinous crimes should be forced into solitary confinement for a certain amount of their, like, let's say, sentence. So on one hand, appealing to the emotion of, oh, every person has some individual rights and you can't throw people into solitary confinement because they've done a bad thing, is certainly, it certainly sounds good. But we have to ensure that this also offers the victim some sort of catharsis, and whether or not doing this to someone who has committed a crime of a heinous capacity is justified or can be justified or not. So the burden on teams has to be that you prove that doing XYZ and appealing to this emotion is something which stands in this debate. And you shouldn't just go ahead and give credit to it if and when, whenever teams make this. So as I said, you need to have certain amount of analysis behind this appeal to emotion or behind this appeal to authority, after which you can go ahead and like judge whether or not this claim can be like credited or not. So I think that clears it up. To what extent should emotional persuasion be taken into account? Not to the highest extent. The reason for that is that debates are primarily about logic. So it's a sort of verbal and mental chess that both teams are playing with each other, and you are the sort of like judge or arbiter or moderator of that. So suppose that both teams are absolutely equivalent in the sort of material they bring you, in the sort of analysis they bring you, in the sort of impacting they bring you, in the sort of, let's say, weighing that they do for you. Like it's just mind-bogglingly symmetric and equal, and there is just nothing in this debate except for rhetoric, except for analysis of rhetoric. I think at that point, when everything else is just like symmetric, is when appeals to rhetoric become a metric in and of themselves. Like that's when it becomes a metric on which the debate can be decided. If that's not the case, and there are certain fluctuations in material which you have been able to, on which you have been able to decide the call, if that's the case, I think rhetoric can be used as supplemental material to analyze what argument is good and what argument is bad, and what impact is good and what impact is bad. Because mostly teams won't bring you rhetoric just for, let's say, mechanization. They bring you rhetoric alongside impacting to tell you that, oh, XYZ minority group in certain countries is the worst affected by this. Their children can't go to school. If their children can't go to school, they never get an education. If they never get an education, their lives are going to be like, not, their lives won't be ever fruitful because they won't be able to upskill themselves. If they're never able to upskill themselves, then their children never go to school. It becomes a vicious cycle, and these people are never able to go ahead and like opt out of this vicious cycle. They have no like sort of capacity to go ahead and do so. So note that these are impacts, sure, but they are sprinkled in with some sort of rhetoric too. And all of this rhetoric shouldn't just be discarded. It should also be taken into account when you're going ahead and like judging the debate. Okay, when you say not to presume geographical background, how to judge claims which are explained with respect to geography? Example, a person, if a debate is on the education system, the speaker relates their claim to the Indian education system. Should we only award claims which don't limit to a country or geography? Okay, so this is more about like motion burden. So in cases where the debate is about the education system and the motion hasn't specified that this is about the education system of a specific country, you don't go ahead and accept claims, or like at least you don't go ahead and give the most amount of importance to claims which are specific to one country. So sure, the Indian education system has a lot of bad things about it, but the debate isn't about the Indian education system. It's about educational institutions and systems in general. So ensure that, so if a team ties their side of the debate to only the Indian education system, then you can go ahead and implicitly understand or analyze the level of the claim that should be credited. Because if the debate is about the world and I'm just talking about India, then obviously the impact that my claims will have in this debate is going to be reduced in nature. So you can't go ahead and like absolutely credit them to the highest degree that the claim is claiming. You're going to have to tone it down a little. And in the OA, you can tell them that, bro, this debate was not about like just India. It has to have some certain context about other countries, etc. So I think, yeah, that's my answer to that. I think that clears it out, and I don't see any other questions. So we can move on. Don't worry, we'll have a question answer session at the end. So if you have questions which I'm not taking yet, we'll take them at the end. Don't worry. Okay, cool. Tracking and note taking. I want you guys to pay attention to this section because a lot of people come to me and ask, "Oh, we want to get into judging. We don't know how to take notes, and we miss material. So what do we do?" So the first slide on this is just about like, and you can just like quickly read through it, and I'm going to read through it with you. It's just about things that you should track and you shouldn't track. And in like as we move forward, I'm going to talk about how you track. So that's about just like so track. This is just key arguments and their supporting reasons, your own assessment checkpoint. So suppose like the PM speech is going on and the PM makes a claim. So after their speech, like in during their speech and after their speech, you can just make a quick note on, oh, PM like proved XYZ in the debate, and he made a second claim, but he wasn't able to prove this claim. So etc etc. So you can just like make some sort of like checkpoint for you to refer back to during the next speech, or let's say whenever the other side is going ahead and interacting with the PM speech, etc. And obviously after the debate is done, for you to decide the call. Responses and rebuttals, how they engage with each other. This is something obvious. Like PM says something, LO will say something to respond to PM, and obviously they are going to interact and they're going to rebut and they're going to respond. So how these interactions happen amongst themselves is something that you should take note of while you are judging the debate, and preferably whenever like on paper or on the laptop, wherever you're taking notes. The second is about weighing claims and impact comparisons. Obviously, whatever weighing the other side or like both sides are giving you and whatever impacts they're talking about should be like noted. POI engagement, who offered the POI, who took the POI, and quality of exchange. So if the PM speech is going on and you're taking notes on the PM speech, take note of which from opposition is asking this POI and what is then the quality of exchange. So, and we'll talk about this at length in nature as to like how you credit POIs. So I'm not going to delve deep into this, but the quality of exchange is something you should underline in your notes right now for this session. We're going to come back to this, and obviously then your short summary at the end of some speech. So if you think that there is something important that was achieved at the end of the speech, or if there is some specific missing burden that should have been fulfilled by the end of the speech but it was not, just anything, absolutely anything which you think is important for you to remember, just flag it out at the end of the speech just for yourself in the notes. Skip this. Verbatim transcripts, you are not a court transcriber. You don't need to note down 100% of everything that teams are telling you and speakers are telling you. That's unnecessary. Jokes, unless they matter, pretty self-explanatory. Every single example cited, again, examples are not the most important thing in debates. Repeated mechanizations, so teams will make two claims and they'll just repeat mech. So don't waste your time noting everything down again. Things you hear but don't understand. This is tricky. Or what I mean by this is that they're going to say things which will not make sense. So just mark a star alongside it that, okay, this is something that they tried to do, but I don't understand it. And in the OA, you can say, oh, you tried to establish this, but I could never understand it. The reason I could never understand it is because XYZ explanation was missing from your end, or XYZ explanation could have been better in ABC way. So stuff like that is what I mean by things you hear but don't understand. And then style observations that don't affect argument strength, obviously. Cool. So I'm going to go over then how exactly do I take notes, and in general, how do people take notes and what works. So there are two ways that people take notes. One is digitally on their laptop or wherever, and the other is just using a sheet and pen and paper. So what I do personally is that I take whatever notebook I am, using, and I just open to a new page and I go ahead and take notes like this. So if you can see, yeah. So I write the motion on top, and then I just split the page into two parts where, let me just, yeah, where you can go ahead and, yeah. So I split the page into two parts. On top of one side, I write PM. On top of the other side, I write LO. So this is the PM speech. And if you move forward to the next page, it's continued. The page is still split. So this is the continuation of the PM speech. Suppose the PM speech ends here. I can go back to the previous page and then I start writing the LO speech and then I continue the LO speech. And that's how I judge debates. So after the LO is done, I flip the page again. I write like DPM DLO and I continue with the division. And that's how people take notes on sheets. And I think on laptops I have tried, and on digital medias I have tried. I personally am not comfortable with it. I just like to have like pen and paper and just like scribbling throughout the debate, making notes and making arrows and pointers and doing a lot of like personal things which help me understand the debate. The other way to do it is on your laptop. So if you see that there are two columns here, you just open a Word doc, you insert a table which has two columns. On one side you write PM, on the other side you write LO, and then you just continue and type out. Those are largely the two ways that people take notes. And I'm not going to go over like how to take notes in BPs because this is an AP adjudication session. So we're going to just stick to the most simple answer and the most simple thing we need to understand, which is just on how to take notes in like an AP. So that's how you do it. You just split your page or your Google Doc into two parts and you take notes. Um, so yeah, okay. But what are other things that you should do while you are taking notes? So right end of speech checkpoints. Again, this is something which you've already talked about. Track to understand. If you're furiously writing and not processing, you need to stop and you need to listen and you need to understand and then you need to write. The reason for this is that when you are writing something down, you are hearing it and penning it down on paper. It's not necessarily true that you are going ahead and understanding what the other side means by what they are saying. You'll have to go ahead and read what you're writing again to understand what the other side is saying. So while someone is speaking, don't note down exactly what they're saying. Listen to what they're saying. After they're done with making the claim, understand what their claim is, what the two pieces or three pieces of mechanization were that they offered, and then write it down. This way, you do what they have actually done in the debate and actually establish. You write down what they've actually like said in the debate and established in the debate, and you do it in a way which facilitates your understanding of this debate. So that's what I mean by like track to understand. The second is build a personal symbol system. And this is just my personal recommendation to you. It doesn't matter whether you're taking notes on paper or whether you're taking notes on a computer. You need to have some personal specialization or like some personal specification about like how you can go ahead and understand those notes. So whenever someone is describing an impact, I literally just go and circle it that this is the impact. Whenever someone is talking about whenever someone is talking about mechanizations, what I usually do is I write the claim on top and then I just use arrows under that to signify, oh, this is the mech for this, this is the mech for this, this is the mech for this. You should go ahead and practice and develop your own like writing system, be it on like, let's say if you're taking notes on your laptop, like just make like bold kar do ya underline kar do kisi cheez ko, or you use arrows or bullet points or whatever you're comfortable with. That way it's just like clearer to you. Then use a split screen summary doc. So what some people do is that they have a master sheet and they then have a summary sheet. So what I showed you is a master sheet, which I like held up to this like camera and showed you and divided the page into two parts. That's the master sheet where I note everything down. And then some people keep a summary sheet where after every speech they write PM and they just describe what's the most important thing that PM said. And this is something that they just use to get back to and like just use for a general understanding. So whenever you're done with with listening to the debate, you're filling ballots, you're making your OA, you can refer to the summary sheet and then go ahead and refer to the master sheet whenever you have to go ahead and like understand or revisit something specific. So instead of having to process a lot of data at the end to make your OA, you have certain amount of data specified for you to be like, which is necessary for you to have your OA prepared. And yeah, don't let tracking create tunnel vision. Don't think about the speech itself. You should map out how ideas interact with across the debate. So you will find that PM says something, but it doesn't come up again until the whip, and the whip is giving some random extension for it. So you need to have a way to connect both of those things. So don't be afraid to like scribble in your notes and just like have your personal system made for you when you go ahead and take notes. I think the most important thing in note taking is personalization. I can give you a skeletal structure where you can go ahead and just like take into consideration what I personally use and what I've seen people use. But at the end of the day, you'll have to find a system which works for you, and that's not something that anyone can give you. So just practice is what will make you better at this. Um, cool. Next, I think what we can do is talk about assessing arguments. So, what does an argument actually mean and how you can go ahead and interact with it? But before that, questions, if any. When we are talking about short summary, what should be emphasized? The main argument or the impact analysis or clash analysis, what should be written in that to make it easy for us? So, I think mostly in like 95% of debates, the way people speak is they give you a claim, they give you a mechanization, and they give you an impact. They so suppose PM or LO comes, they will spend like 2 minutes doing each. So for 2 minutes, they'll talk about one claim, its mechanization, and its impacts. For the next 2 minutes, they're going to talk about a new claim, its mechanization, and its impacts. So in the master sheet, you can have detailed notes for it, sure. But in the summary sheet, what you can do is just write in like 2 lines max that, oh, this was the claim, this is the most important piece of mechanization, and this is the most important impact for it. Some people don't even write the mechanization in the summary sheet. They just write claim and impact because that's actually what matters, right? Like you can obviously refer back to the mechanization when you go to your master sheet, so you don't need to repeat like whatever you're writing and waste your time with it. Um, that's the idea. But personally, I don't even use a summary sheet. I just have that one master sheet that I use where I've like written everything in segregated columns and structures. Cool. I don't see any other questions, so I think we can move forward about how we go ahead and assess arguments. Great. So persuasiveness has two parts. The first is analysis. The second is impacting. And there is a very clear distinction, which is very obvious in this debate, in debates, what actually is matter and what actually is impacting. So I think, and because maybe I think I'm assuming that most of you have an idea of like what Asian parliamentary debates are, what is the difference between like mechanization and matter, and what is the difference between impacting. I'm assuming most of you are like aware of this. So this is the starting point for us. And if like you are not aware, I think that maybe come back to the recording of this debate, of this session, and like go over this again. Um, okay, so what is analysis? It's the plausible reasons that show an argument is true and important. The basic idea is that there's a cause and there's an effect, and logical links must be which connect the cause to the effect. And what is impacting? Impacting is just in general about who cares about this matter. So when you think about impacts, you think about, oh, okay, agar XYZ चीज हो जाएगी तो किसको इससे फर्क पड़ेगा? Who will care if XYZ thing happens in the world? So that's what impact is. So clarity and rhetorical power are not a separate score. It's how analysis is conveyed, obviously. And matter without impacting will not persuade anyone. So it's a combination of matter and impacting that goes ahead and convinces you. And the basic structure is cause, effect, impact, which is what I tell you, like the claim, mechanization, impact. That's what most speeches will follow. And obviously there can be deviations to this, and you will find a lot of deviations to this. But most speakers like have some impacting in their speech regardless. So again, impacting and analysis, they're not independent criteria, and understand that without impacting, you can never go ahead and assess claims to the best capacity, because then they are just theoretical concepts and they're abstract concepts. So unless and until I can illustrate to you and I can like impact and I can give impacts of bad things in the world, I can't convince you fully to the extent or scope of what those bad things are. So suppose I want to tell you that poverty is a bad thing. Sure. At a human level, at just an English grammar level, I think most people understand that poverty is a bad thing. But assume you have never seen poverty. Assume like you are a privileged person and you don't know the nitty-gritties of poverty. Someone from a background who is not as privileged as you would have to like explain their circumstances for you to understand the effects that are present in their life. So abject poverty looks like you don't have 2 square meals a day, you don't have a proper shelter, your roof is leaking, you probably have to go to school, you probably don't have school, you probably like have to take baths and drink very unclean water, your food is probably like you probably just never get food in the first place, like you're almost starving, stuff like that. So unless and until I tell you what this abject poverty looks like and I prove to you that these are the impacts that can be derived off of abject poverty. You can't go ahead and understand the theoretical concept of how this poverty will change someone's lives. So without impacting, matter cannot be credited. The same goes in the opposite direction. Without matter, there can be no impacting. So unless and until I know what the concept is, I can't derive impacts from it. So both of these things have to be taken into account when you go ahead and like analyze different things in an argument. So these are the four basic questions which you should ask yourself about analysis of arguments. So is the logic well connected and clear? Is this asserted or actually proved? Is the explanation intuitive or counterintuitive? And are there logical holes in the chain? So suppose there are two teams, both give you some, they both give you some matter and both give you some impacting. The first thing you do is think about, okay, is the link between cause and effect actually proven, that x thing causes causes y impact, or x thing causes y effect? Like, is that logical linkage present? Are there holes in this logical chain? Is a leading to b leading to c leading to d, or are they just jumping from a to d? Like, this is just a mental maths that you will have to do with yourself. The second is about whether something is asserted or actually proved, and we're going to get to this later. So I'm not going to talk about this at length, but there is a difference between assertions and arguments, and we'll discuss this and how to credit assertions and arguments. Is the explanation intuitive or counterintuitive? This is again self-explanatory, I think. Whether or not what they are saying actually like makes sense. Like, you can't claim that the sun rises in the west. That's not intuitive. Like you just know that the sun rises in the east. So, and that if the sun rises in the east, an intuitive claim to make is that the first state which receives sunlight in India is Arunachal Pradesh. That's the intuitive argument to make. A counterintuitive argument to make is, since the sun rises in the east, the first state to receive the light of the sun is Madhya Pradesh. Like, that's just not intuitive. So it's not believable. So are there logical holes is something I've talked about. So that's the basic idea on persuasion, and we'll discuss more on like assertions and arguments later. So like in the next slides only, I think. Yeah, so this is about assertions. And I think, yeah, as the slide says, this is the most common error that judges make when they're new to judging, that they can't identify, or at least they can't credit to the best capacity an assertion and an argument. So in debates, the holy grail is for you to be able to have an argument which is well mechanized. So there is just one maths equation that like exists in debate land, and this is the only maths equation that exists in debate land. Arguments are equal to mechanization plus claim. Without mechanization, your claim is just an assertion. So arguments are equal to assertion plus claim. That's the only mathematics formula that you have to remember. But what is the difference between like assertion and argument? So consider the motion. This house, as the US, would do conventional warfare in Iran rather than pursuing economic sanctions. So I think most people are aware that US has a lot of economic sanctions, or at least has had a lot of economic sanctions like pushed on Iran so that they can leverage the Strait of Hormuz and all of that. So that's like I just wanted to use this because it's the most like current example. So an assertion would be that opposition tells you that we can prevent war, and that must be the most important thing because war would be devastating for everyone. So op tells you that if we have economic sanctions instead of conventional warfare, we will prevent war. Like, war will not happen. That's what an assertion is. What would be an argument is if they explain why war is less likely, or what specific mechanism exists which does not exist on SideGov that reduces the risk of war. So just because they say that war is bad doesn't prove that war is not probable. So the nuance here is to understand that there is a difference between the specific mechanism being economic sanctions and being something else. So if op claim is we will prevent war because we have economic sanctions, this is not something that I can buy to the highest degree, because that's just your motion burden. You are just repeating your motion burden. What would be a specific mechanism is, oh, because there are economic sanctions, there exist less capital on Iran to go ahead and fund their side of the war. So they can't go ahead and manufacture or buy the sort of machines required to do war. They can't domestically produce enough resources to fund the war because you're economically sanctioned. You can't have business with other countries for there to be an income stream in your country, and that is why war will be less likely because Iran will not have lesser capacity to inflict damage on other countries. That's the mechanization. This is what the difference between an assertion and an argument is. So when you go ahead and judge claims, you need to ask yourself, does the team do enough work to prove what they're saying is true, or are they just saying something which sounds really important? And if the answer is no, that they don't prove what they're saying, it's just an assertion and you can't credit it to the highest extent. I'll take questions about this later, um, after I talk about like rebuttals. So how do you go ahead and credit rebuttals then? I think the first thing is, does it attack the core of the argument or does it attack the periphery? So let's just take this motion for example. If this is the op claim that, oh, because Iran has specific, like Iran does not have enough money to fund the war, they can't do the war. Suppose proposition comes and says that, okay, we have a response to this. We think that Iran can still do the war because it has oil reserves, and those oil reserves would make money for Iran. So I want you to analyze whether or not this attacks the core of what op is saying, or whether this attacks just something in periphery. I think this attacks something in periphery because op claim is not that you can't produce enough domestic revenue to fund the war itself. It's that you will never no. It's that you can't have an external source of income in your country, because if you're economically sanctioned, you can't do business with other countries, and no one is like allowed to buy oil from you. That's why you will not make money. So you having oil fields is not enough. You need to have a place where you can sell that oil, and if you are sanctioned, no one can buy the oil and you will never have that sort of money to fund the war. That's the difference between attacking the core of an argument and attacking something around the argument. So understand and analyze whether a rebuttal is attacking the core or whether it affects or like attacks the periphery. The second is, does it reduce, negate, or flip the claim? A rebuttal can do three things. The first is that it can reduce the impact or the extent or the scale of that claim. So it can be enough to reduce the magnitude or the harm that is caused on people. The second idea is that it can totally just reduce it to zero, like that, and that's called negation. So the claim existed and it was propped up, and the rebuttal came and punched it, and so it's fallen flat, and there's just a net zero and nothing exists. Or it can flip the claim. So a rebuttal can go ahead and say that oh, our response to this is in a way which flips the argument on our side, and so this the mechanization is stronger on our side, and then the claim stands on their side. That's called flipping the claim. And then you go ahead and credit it to whatever side does this mental maths or this game better. Is the rebuttal itself proven? Again, this is most important. Like if the rebuttal is again just an assertion, then it's not true. So if a rebuttal itself is just a claim without the mechanization, again, it's not a rebuttal. So so saying something like, oh, your argument is wrong because of X. So in judging debates, and this is about and this is something which I'm adding here, which is not on the slide, and it's important for you to know. Whenever you go ahead and analyze arguments and the importance of arguments, you think and ask yourself two things: is X true, and is X important? If both of these questions are answered in the best capacity, then this argument becomes enough to credit, or at least credit in the highest degree. So this is also applicable on rebuttals. Saying, if someone says your argument is wrong because of X, what is X? Is X true, and is X important? You need to apply this scrutiny to rebuttals also for you to credit them. And then lastly, how much did opposition engage? So there can be instances in debates which are not ideal, where someone says something, or the opposition team comes and responds to it, and the prop never then responds to it. So it just exists as a clash. But also that there can just be a claim that exists and opposition never breaks it down, so it just stands in this debate. If this just stands in the debate, you go ahead and credit it, and then you analyze to what degree you credit it. Like, what is the importance of this claim, and whether this importance is analyzed in the debate also. Um, Crediting POIs is something we'll get to later. I just want to see if we have questions on what we've discussed so far. When you attack the periphery, does that count as reducing the claim? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Like, I think the example that I gave, in that example, it can't be counted as reducing the reducing the claim, because it's not even addressing the claim. But sometimes you can have situations where attacking something around the argument can reduce the claim. So a way to say do this is if you attack the impacts of the argument. So there are two ways where you can, which teams use to rebut claims. The first is just breaking the claim down and saying that, oh, what you are claiming is incorrect. So this takes care of the impacts also, because if what you're claiming is incorrect, you can't derive the impacts from it. The other idea is that if the claim is too strong, you attack the impacts. You say that, oh, you gave me two impacts. Both of them are something we cannot buy, and both of them are something which are untrue. And so your claim gets reduced or minimized. So I think this is where like attacking something in the periphery of the claim can also reduce the claim. But other than this, you need to be mindful about like whether something actually even addresses what the claim is. And if it doesn't, and it's just something random which is like 2 miles away, it like is not affecting the debate at all. So it can just be an irrelevant POI or an irrelevant rebuttal. Okay. Any other questions about like rebuttals or assertions, persuasiveness, impacting anything? Is reducing claim slash negating claim slash flipping the claim equally awarded? Uh, Again, this depends from debate to debate. So I think different judges have different readings of this also. So again, it's subjective from debates, and different judges judge it in different manners. But I'll just tell you what the manual says. It's not about what values more, it's about what adds more to the debate. So let's say that a claim exists and there are three ways to deal with it. First, you can just negate it. The second is that you can flip it. The third is that you can like reduce it to the highest degree. I think if I'm to give you just a basic idea, then I would say that like negating the claim and flipping it, or like a combination of both of these things, is the most astute way or the smartest way to go ahead and rebut what the other side is saying. Because not only did you prove what they are saying is untrue, but you prove that it's likely to happen on your side more, or it's likely to happen better in your side. So a combination of negating it and then flipping it is something which is really nice. Another thing can just be just like reducing the impacts. Again, it depends on the debate whether the impacts are something which are most important or not. But yeah, you I don't think I can give you a like direct answer about, oh, this is most important, this is least important. It depends on debate to debate. Can a rebuttal be awarded in the same manner as an actual argument if all the mecha impacts are present? Yeah. So this is pretty common that something starts as a rebuttal from LO, but at the end of LO speech or by DLO speech or by whip speech even, it becomes an argument in and of itself. So it's completely possible. And if it happens that, oh, there just exists two counter claims which are rebutting each other, then you weigh them out as arguments. Like that's just like that's just like simply what you can choose to do. Again, it depends from debate to debate, but I think we are all very smart, so we can figure this out. It's not like the most crazy thing in the debate, but I think we should move forward with this. Crediting POIs. Okay, I think this is the sweetest section in this debate because it's like very easy to understand, or like in this session because it's very easy to understand what to track. Whether POIs were offered, accepted, rejected, what is the quality of the POI and the response, did the speaker ever engage meaningfully? So the new manual tells us that if you don't ask POIs, or if you don't take POIs, we are to just reduce speaker points because it means that you are not engaging in this debate. So you need to keep track of whether or not a speaker is taking a POI or not. POI quality, again, a POI that fact checks a claim or exposes a logical gap, it that creates a demand. Then, like, suppose like there exists a claim and someone asks a POI, and that POI asks the speaker to explain a logical gap. from A to C. So suppose the speaker was jumping to A to C from A to C, and the POI says, "Oh, but B exists. Are A and B even related? And then are B and C even related?" So they ask them to fill this gap. So now it's the burden on the speaker to fill that gap. And if the gap is not filled, then the gap weighs against them. That's pretty simple to identify. Silver bullet POIs, these are extremely rare. They were like occasionally there will come a POI which will just like obliterate a claim, and it damages an argument to the extent that it cannot be brought back. So I think then you analyze what is the response to that POI, then how much damage was actually done, how much damage was recovered, etc. This is again very rare because most people in debate land don't make that mistake. And also motions are built in a way where you can't just go ahead and silver bullet claims, etc. Acceptance, again, this is something which I've talked about. It's on engagement. Um, don't treat a POI as gospel. So again, a 15 seconds question will really like destroy a 7-minute argument. It creates a like tangent, and then the question in that claim and under that heading is who answers that tangent at that tangent best, and then which team you can award the POI or the, let's say, analysis to. And in closed debates, obviously POIs can be tiebreakers where a POI can create a clash, and through that clash you can weigh out the round. So again, that's on crediting POIs. And yeah, the next thing is on resolving clashes and weighing, and we'll get to this. But what do you actually do when there are links missing from both sides? In that case, how do you assess the claims made by either side? Okay, so it's in so and okay, so this is something which will be resolved by this resolving clashes and weighing. So I'll come and like so I'll try and answer this through that section, and I'll come back and ask Atish you specifically whether your doubt is resolved or not, and if it's not, we'll take this up again. I'm just asking you to pause for a few minutes. And how many speaker scores are to be reduced if a speaker doesn't take a POI? Also, do we credit the same scores to the speaker asking the POI particularly? No. So you can't you don't credit someone for asking a POI. That's not how it's done. And again, there is not a certain set amount of speaker scores that the manual says you have to reduce if someone doesn't take a POI. This is something which is subjective, and in good debates and even in bad debates, you as the judge are expected to say, please ask POIs. They're extremely important. Like you're expected to flag this out to teams as a judge. So I think that it's rare that no team takes no POIs. But in the case that there's an absence of absence of a POI, I think you should use your better judgment and not just like reduce 2 or 3 speaker points when someone does not ask a POI. And even so, conventionally speaking, most people or most judges don't go ahead and just reduce speaker points when no POIs exist, because POIs again are just a 15-minute loan given to opposition speaker when proposition speaker is speaking. So it's not the most world-ending thing for you to reduce speaker points on anyway. So I think I want you to just be mindful of that when you are judging debates. But sure, resolving clashes and weighing and deciding who wins these clashes. So the first idea in this is about understanding motion burdens. And I think there are 3 sections of judging. The first is before the debate, the second is during the debate, and the third is after the debate. We've talked a lot about what you're supposed to do during the debate, which is that, oh, you take notes, you analyze, you write down, you weigh it out, you understand assertions, you understand rebuttals, you understand arguments, you understand like POIs, and you credit them, whatever. But there exists a part which exists before the debate even starts. And this is something which I personally do, that I prefer to sit in the room for 5 minutes before the round starts. I open the manual, I open the motion, I read the motion, and I check the motion burden in the manual. So if it's a THW motion, if it's a THP motion, if it's a this house prefers the world motion, if it's a this house supports opposes motion, I go ahead and read in the manual what the burden of this motion is on side gov and on side op, and I understand for myself कि भाई motion क्या करने को कह रहे हैं दोनों sides को. This is something which needs to happen before the debate starts, and it's your job as a judge to do this and before every single round. Doesn't matter the importance of this round of the round. I think ethically speaking, you guys should be very very cognizant and follow the manual to a T. I would even suggest कि यार अगर आपको confusion हो रही है debate के बीच में, just open the manual and just read it again and again and clarify for yourself what the motion burden is. Yeah. So understanding burdens. So there are two ways in which burdens can exist in this debate in debates. The first is from the motion itself, and this. So the example for this is this House would prioritize vaccination of law-abiding citizens. So the burden on Gov in this motion is to tell me why you should have specific prioritization of law-abiding citizens. The burden on op is that there should be no prioritization regardless of whether a person is law abiding or not. So even let's say people who don't abide by the law, who don't pay taxes, who are criminals, they should get equal access to vaccinations as a person who abides the law, who pays taxes, who doesn't do any crimes, who doesn't break the signal does. So the motion is this: the debate is not about whether vaccines are good in general, whether or not law abiding citizens can change or not, or yada yada. So all of this doesn't matter. So be very clear about what you can extract for from the motion and what is the thing that teams need to achieve the most, or like first. The second is from teams on analysis. So in general, teams will generate their own burdens by the claims they make. If op says assassination violates international law, they now have the burden to explain why illegality is equal to illegitimacy. So suppose the motion is about this house prefers a world where political, like international political assassinations did not exist. So if op says that assassinations, or like prop says that assassinations would violate international law, they have to now prove that just because something is illegal, why is it also illegitimate? Because there can exist dictatorial leaders who deserve to deserve quote unquote to get assassinated, etc. And obviously all of this is very subjective, and this is not my personal opinion. No one should get assassinated, so you should follow due course of law. So the idea is that burdens can exist from teams own claims also, and if they don't prove the link, then the argument is incomplete, and you should treat it as, oh, there is some sort of missing mechanization which exists, or some sort of missing link that exists. Without this link, your argument cannot be complete. So these are the three, and last में तीन चीजें लिखी है. These are obvious, but I'll just flag them out. Failing to meet a burden is not an automatic loss. You need to evaluate what teams proved and did not prove. Sometimes motion is something else, and both teams are debating something else. What happens in that case is also something that we will discuss. But just because teams did not to the T follow their motion burden and prove exactly what is written in the motion, it doesn't mean that they're automatically losing. Teams cannot create burdens for opponents simply by asserting that they exist. So in this motion, prioritization of vaccination, team cannot claim that, oh, Gov also needs to prove what law abiding means and what laws should be broken for you to be ineligible to go ahead and not get vaccination. And then they have to prove why it's okay to break some law and why it's not okay to break some law. Like, this is just an assertion. You can't like push this on the other team. So you can't create motions or like create burdens from just like simply um, asserting what the other team should do. And obviously, you as the judge should not impose unrequired burdens and step into the debate. Moving on. So identifying and resolving clashes. So how do you actually do this? First is that you identify the clashes. I think in general, in a debate, even in the best debate, there will not be more than 2 or 3 clashes. इससे ज़्यादा होते ही नहीं. So focus on what both teams spend a lot of their airtime on, where the engagement was the most, and obviously then it will, like, I can't tell you, like I can't there's no other way to say this, but it will be very obvious what a clash is, because someone will say X, the other person will say Y, and then they'll just constantly be fighting about X and Y, and it will become a clash. Similarly for Y, like A and B and C and D and stuff like that. So at best there will be like 2 or 3 clashes. Second, when you identified a clash, is assess who proved their side. Ask yourself, did this team actually prove their claim with logical links, did this team prove their claim with logical links? Did it prove it with mechanization? Did it prove it with impacting? Did they just assert it? What is the quality of the analysis that they're giving? And then you go ahead and analyze this for the other team, and then you compare and you weigh out. So that the act of that comparison, after you've asked all of these questions to yourself for both teams, is called weighing. So identifying and resolving clashes is just another phrase for weighing, and how you weigh a debate is this. So third, evaluate the rebuttals. Obviously, I think I just wanted to flag this out, but this is a part of just analyzing what mechanizations were offered and what is the quality of the mechanizations. When you go ahead and analyze whether a mechanization is good or not, you take into account what the rebuttal was, what the POI was, and whether that mechanization survives the damage that the POI does, and what exactly is the rebuilding of that mechanization that exists in this debate. And then finally, what you get as an amalgamation of all of these questions and all of this back and forth is the claim which is left for you to divide the clash on or decide the clash on. And then lastly, decide who wins the clash, which is that compare like holistically. A team with three weaker sub arguments doesn't automatically beat a team with one powerful well proved argument. So just because someone has three weak arguments doesn't mean they can't take down someone with one strong argument, and just because someone has one strong argument doesn't mean they can't take down someone with three weak arguments. Like, it genuinely is very subjective, and it depends on how you are able to understand and how teams are able to justify to you whether or not they can prove what they are proving. And what helps in this is point number 5, which is the weighing that teams give you themselves. So suppose someone makes 3 claims, suppose someone makes 1 claim, like prop makes 3 claims, op makes 1 claim, but op speaker is able to tell you that sure, we only make 1 claim and everything else we say is untrue, and they make 3 claims, and they weigh out to you why that 1 claim is the most important thing. So suppose they make a social claim and prop makes 3 economic claims. They can just say that the economics in this debate is not as important, because if people don't have rights and civil liberties, they can't go ahead and ever exercise their economic opportunities in the first place. They can't get the same access to education, etc., etc. So we win this debate because we provide social benefits and civil liberties to people, etc., in the first place. So you also have to take into account the weighing that teams do for you. And it's best if you actually do use the weighing that teams give for you, because weighing can also exist on comparison. So one, like, gov whip will come and give you some weighing, op whip will come and give you some weighing, they will rebut each other, and those rebuttals are something again which you can credit. Use reply speeches as a guide. Again, reply speeches are not ceremonial. Don't just start making your OA when the reply speech starts. The weighing and framing in reply speeches can identify what the classes are and what the exact mechanization is that you should decide the debate on. And this is more so important also because, like, gov reply is the only speech that can then, like, identify flaws in op whip speech, etc. So this is also something that you should keep in mind, that you don't just discard reply speeches. Great. Weighing hierarchy. And I think this answers the question, or like it will help answering the question that Atish asked, which is that how do you decide what you should judge the debate on? I think you should, like, this is the basic idea. And there is some nuance to this, which I will explain to you at the end of discussing this chart. So the first idea is on proximity to motion burden. The motion has given you something to defend. If you defend it better than the other side, you win. That's the most proximate motion burden. Even if teams say that there exists something even more important in this debate, it doesn't matter, because that more important thing is not something that you have to prove. You have to prove this less important thing. And if you can prove this less important thing better than the other side can prove it, then you win this debate. The second is explicit agreement. All teams explicitly agree on this metric, on XYZ metric, or on XYZ clash as being the most important clash, or XYZ impact on being the most important impact. Then you go ahead and use that impact to go ahead and make the call. And the nuance here is that sometimes both teams debate on the wrong motion burden. What do you do then? कि भाई दोनों ने ही खराब डिबेट करी है और दोनों ने ही अपना मोशन बर्डन प्रूव नहीं किया है, एंड वो एक्चुअली कोई थर्ड चीज डिस्कस कर रहे हैं. In this case, the manual has asked us that you judge the debate on the basis of what has happened in the debate. So you are allowed to deviate a little bit from the motion burden, because anyway you don't have material that agrees to the motion burden at all. So you fall back to what the team is saying, and you don't insert yourself in this debate, and you don't cook up random mech that can fit in either side, and you just simply take agreement of what explicitly both teams give you. The third metric is implicit agreement. No teams, like, states the metric, but all arguments point the same way. So all teams can be talking about how actors are vulnerable, but no one will actually say that this debate is about vulnerable actors. That is an implicit agreement, And sometimes analyzing the motion burden can also help you identify what the implicit burden or the agreement is. And you can infer from this implicit agreement what you should decide the debate on. The fourth thing is that one team proves it and the other team just does not. So different metrics are given to you, and they are so different that you cannot choose which one you should decide the debate with. Then you go ahead and look at what team is able to prove to you that their metric is more important. If some team gives you analysis on why economics in a debate is more important, or like having capital is more important than having civil liberties, because let's say if you have money, then you can literally just buy your way into everything. You can just have a flourishing business, and even if people from your community don't have certain rights, you can go ahead and establish yourself as an industry dominant player in that field, and then just work for the betterment of your community, and in the future ensure civil liberties for those people. And they prove to you that their metric of capital is more important through this mechanization. The other team has no material to prove why their metric is better, even if it sounds better in theory that you should have civil liberties to be able to actually exercise the capital that you have. Like if the team does not do legwork to prove why their metric is important, then you go and agree with, and you go and use the metric of capital that one team has spent a lot of time on. And the last and final thing is OIV weighing. And this is literally the last resort. I mean, ideally, no one should get to this point, but it can be that the debate ran so parallel that nobody proves their metric. There is no agreement anywhere. Then you ask yourself, okay, there is no material on which to judge this debate. What would an average person want to agree with more? What would the average person prioritize? And then you decide the debate on that. And disclaimer, this is probably the worst position you can be in, because sure, the debate was bad, but also then your justification to the debate and the call is also something which is like in question. So again, I would say that avoid using the fifth thing and ensure that you use the top four things in that order, and you'll probably be set. This is literally what every judge aspires to perform in the best capacity, that they follow this chart to the T, and they can go ahead and like establish and agree on, or like differentiate on whatever the team is saying, and then decide the debate. Handling contradictions. This is the last. I think this is the last. Yeah, this is the last section, or like the last slide on this section, which is that how do you actually go ahead and handle contradictions? I think the most important thing, like you can just forget this slide. The most important thing in this is that credit what comes first. That's what the manual tells you. Um, Manual says that if PM makes one claim and then PM makes another claim, and claim number two is a contradiction to claim number one, you discard claim number two and you just focus on claim number one. The same is true if like PM makes one claim and like DPM makes another claim which is in contradiction to PM claim. You discard whatever like that second claim is, and you just focus on whether or not the material actually also fits in the first claim, and then you like go ahead and judge this debate. Second speaker can defend first claim if DPN dissent. So if Gov says we want more money and then contradicts with, oh, we don't want more money, only the first one counts. If DPM defends the original that we want more money, it's fine. DPM can also contradict, but then they are discredited. This is something which I've discussed. The contradiction weakens the first claim. Like obviously you don't discard it to the capacity that you just like go ahead and never talk about it again. Contradictions will affect your claims which you have already made in this debate, and you have to analyze whether or not the capacity of the contradiction is enough for it to weaken the claim. And if the answer is yes, then to what degree. And opponents must point it out, like judges, yeah, like, and there is certain disagreement in this also, where some judges think that unless and until a team points out a contradiction, I can't credit it. I don't think that's true, because a contradiction is not something that the manual says you have to rely on the opposition to call out. It's something which inherently one speaker or one team does to themselves. So you have to take their material um, compositely and not segregatedly. So if compositely they are contradicting themselves, then you weigh that contradiction, and you don't go ahead and wait for opposition to call it out in the first place. Um, the next section is on the OA. And before we go ahead and go to that, I want to go back to questions. Uh, First, I want to ask Atish, is your question answered? Like you can just type it in chat, yes or no. By the time you type it, I'll just go over other questions. Um, a feedback that we often get is that the debate was parallel. So when a side brings out an argument, is it necessary for the other side to counter those arguments and engage only with the arguments presented by the other side to make it better, to make a better debate and not make it parallel? So yeah, the problem is that debates are run on a comparative. Unless and until there are clashes, you literally can't go ahead and decide the debate. You have to have some comparative material. So I wouldn't say that your case should be responsive in nature, which is something you asked, that you shouldn't focus simply on countering what the other side is saying. You also have to obviously build your own case. But the only way you have comparatives is if your claims are inherently then clashing or rebutting the other side, or you have rebuttals which exist separately from your material that go ahead and rebut the other side. So I think you need to have a mix of both, that you make your own claims, you have a net positive case, and you don't just go ahead and like compete with what the other side is saying. Because if your case is net negative, you don't have any positive material on your side, then you can never win this debate because the judge never knows what benefits you have to offer. I think that solves this. But in novice rooms, I observed that in policy motion, the gov completely skips giving the policy and op flags it out rightly, but the debate still carries on. In this case, do we just make the gov lose as they are just giving harms versus benefits, or do we still go ahead with and we can probably make the gov win without a policy? So again, this is very subjective. Manual says that policy has to come in the first speech, and if it doesn't come in the first speech, like you can't go ahead and like establish the policy in the best extent. Note that there's a nuance here. Manual doesn't say that second speaker can't give a policy. Second speaker can also give like some policy. So like if there is just zero policy that exists on first speaker, then some policy can be given by second, but not all of it. Like you have to penalize the team for not fulfilling speaker burden. But not giving a policy in first speech is not an automatic loss. You can still judge this debate based on what happens in this debate. So suppose Gov does not give you a policy, Op gives you a policy, you figure out or you decide the debate on what side can prove their motion burden better and what side is able to give you then benefits through their policy that align with the motion burden. So I think that's the way you should judge this. But if some team runs net negative and does not give any claims of their own but destroys the ops arguments totally, how do we judge it? Okay, so this tends to happen in some speeches where op has to defend status quo and gov has to give a policy. What ends up happening is that op never gives you a counterfactual because their counterfactual is the status quo. If the counterfactual is the status quo, I believe they still have to tell you the benefits of status quo and have to flag out to you whether or not their benefits outweigh whatever the other side is saying. But if there is just zero, then it's very subjective on whether or not the negative material is enough to then take down whatever positive material that the other side is bringing. And then it's just about harms. So it's just like harms that exist on both sides. So Gov says there are certain positive on our side and negative on our side, and Op just gives you like negatives or like it just breaks down the positive on Gov side. So then there just exists negative on both sides. Which negative is worse? That's something you can ask yourself. But more importantly, which side again is more in proximity to their motion burden? Like when you award the debate, the first thing that comes in your mind is which side is more proximate to their like burden. To what extent are we to use AIV even in a non-parallel debate? Yeah, AIV is not a metric. It's just and it's a mindset to have when you judge debate. Like I cannot transcribe or like give my biases in this debate in debates. I have to then go ahead and like have a mindset of an AIV. So what I mean by this is that I don't know the nitty gritties of Iran and its like problems in the Strait of Hormuz. I know that there are some problems in the Strait of Hormuz. I don't know what caused these problems. The teams have to tell me what caused these problems, and like they have to tell me how they can fix it or whatever the debate is. Similarly, I know that Modi is the Prime Minister of India, but I don't know how much money Modi spends on whatever scheme that they are bringing up next. Like this is something which the teams have to tell me, and then they have to defend whatever they are defending. So AIV is just like a mental structure to have when you're judging the debate. Um, Artist says that their POI is answered, great, or like the question answered. What if the case is completely based on the second claim, which is the contradiction? What do we consider in this case? How do we credit the contradiction? Your manual is very clear about this. You don't credit the contradiction. If the then you can just tell the team in the OA that, bro, your like PM says X, DPM says Y, and then the debate from Gov is just about Y. I think that X and Y are diametrically opposite. They cannot exist in the same world. And because X came first, I can only credit X to you. And if I can only credit X to you, I will judge your case on the basis of what X is and not on what Y is. And the reason for this is that the manual has explicitly asked me to do this. And like that's it. Like that's the justification you have to give, because that's what the manual asks you to do. Your manual is your holy grail. It's the most important document that you will ever have in your debating career, whether you are a speaker or you are a judge. It's literally the only thing that will help you decide debates, give speeches, give OAs, etc. So please, 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 before every debate, doesn't matter if you're speaking or judging, open the manual, read the manual. If first speaker gave policy, can the second speaker add on to the policy? Will that addition to policy be credited fully? Okay, so no. Um, Addition to the policy can be like I'll answer both cases where you are just giving a new model or like an addition to the model. That suppose it's a criminal justice system debate, PM comes and tell you that, oh, we are going to give you a new set of jails where the rehabilitation will be so liberal that these criminals will have open courtyards, they don't have solitary confinement, etc., etc. And then they give their case. Suppose then DPM comes and says that, oh, alongside all of the modeling that PM gave you, I want to also tell you that in these jails, these convicts also have conjugal visits regularly every 2 days, every 3 days. This is a new addition to the policy. This is just new policy itself, like new part of policy itself and new thing itself that exists in this debate. That's not something that you can credit. What you can credit maybe as a addition to policy is maybe if DPM comes and tells you the impacts of already existing policy or the ways in which already existing policy from PM is good, etc. in the first place. So that's how you go ahead and credit this. But if you want a more nuanced answer, please read the manual. That's the best place for you if you want this question answered in the most nuanced manner, because there are other case scenarios that can also exist, and the manual goes over explicitly how you credit and discredit policies. I want to ask that in this house predicts motion, do you think muscle memory actually plays a great role? So I think sometimes it is sometimes very advantageous for an experienced debater as compared to a novice debater. So what should a novice debater actually do at that time? My second question is that in THP motion, suppose both benches do not exactly prove their motion burden, what should our approach be? Okay, so the first part is muscle memory. So by muscle memory, I think you are like I think by what you mean by muscle memory is just like someone who has more tech knowledge or someone who has just practiced those kinds of motion more. I think you can still win because debates are not about experience. And मतलब मेरे पर्सनल एक्सपीरियंस में मैं एक्सपीरियंस टीम्स को इनोवेशन के थ्रू हराता हूँ. Like as experienced as you are, there is always something new that I can think of. And which you have never encountered before, and then it's my job to prove whatever I'm saying to be better than whatever you in your experience have proven in previous debates. That's one way to do it. The other way to do it is just to be principally like sorted कि यार ऑप का यही केस है, गव का यही केस है, मैं कैसे जीत सकता हूँ, क्या विनिंग मेट्रिक्स है. So it's just about that. The second question is, in THP motion, suppose both benches don't prove motion burden, what should be our approach? Very simple. Follow this. You haven't proven your motion burden. Both teams haven't proven motion burden. What have you explicitly agreed on as the metric and as the most vulnerable actor or whatever the metric can be? If that also doesn't exist, what is implicit agreement? कि यार कोई बोल नहीं रहा, but this is the most obvious thing that both teams are talking about. And then lastly, what team proves their metric. Like one team will prove their metric better than the other metric that the other team gives. So you go ahead and judge it on the basis of that. And lastly, then OIV weighing. Um, cool. I don't see other questions, so we'll move on to the last, like second to last thing is the OA. 7 to 10 minutes, most visible part of your job. Great. OA structures and goals. I think very simple. The way I have go ahead, the way I go ahead and you know structure out my OA is very simple. I make general comments. In the general comments, I make qualitative notes for both teams. So I flag out, okay, burden on Gov is X, burden on Op is Y. I think that this is a narrative debate. I think that XYZ is important for you to hear before the OA so that the OA will make sense. So just stuff you think that the teams need to hear, which are not part of clash by clash discussions, but just stuff you think that the teams need to hear. And then you say that, oh, I'm going to talk about framing now and what frame I get from both sides and what frame I accept in this debate. You can either keep it as continuation of general comments or you can just discuss it as frame analysis. It depends on like what style I want to follow. And then you move into clash by clash analysis. So obviously there won't be more than 2 or 3 clashes. So you talk about the first clash. So the way I structure it is okay. The first clash in this debate is on on capital versus civil liberty. Proposition says all of these things. Opposition says all of these things. What is the weighing for this? I think the weighing for this is simple. Um, Opposition has given me more material, or opposition has better impacts, or opposition's claim is more proximate to motion burden, or whatever the like metric is. You insert, so you flag out what both sides say, and then you give a metric on which you can do this, and then you tell the team what metric you have used and why you have used it, and how that metric interacts with both gov case and op case. And then because that metric is better suited coming from gov case, gov wins or op wins, whatever. And then you follow and you rinse and repeat for the further clashes. That's literally it. Like what I want you to ensure is that you maybe have a tipping point कि यार आपने ये बोला इन्होंने ये बोला आपने बोला इन्होंने ये बोला आपने बोला इन्होंने ये बोला फाइनली टिपिंग पॉइंट ये बन के आ गया कि इस मैट्रिक पे इन्होंने ये बोला था और ये जीत गए या आपने ये बोला था आप जीत गए like something like that. And I think this all sounds very abstract because it is, unless and until you practice it, and until you hear a good way, you will never really like understand कि OA में करना ही क्या होता है. So I would suggest that you go to YouTube, you look up Roman Marinov, you look up Pranav Kagalkar or whoever, like Matt Kaito or like I don't know Luigi or Tim Pujlik, and you just look at one of the OAs, recorded OAs that they have given, and understand, try to figure out how they are justifying to teams what call is, etc. And then lastly, questions from team. What I do is I ask the losing team first. So if OA is done and I say if any, I take 2 or 3 questions from all, I move on to Gov, and then we can go and do personal feedback. What I want to flag out is that most judges and most teams don't take personal feedback seriously, and they really should. Like how I can explain this is that teams go ahead and ask for personal feedback, but judges don't ask for feedback on their own. You should, because unless and until you hear from the team what they liked and what they disliked in the debate or in your OA, you can never improve on it. So after you are done with giving your OA, even if no teams approach you for feedback, you should approach the teams and ask, hi, do you have any feedback on my OA? Is there something you liked? Is there something you disliked? Is there something you thought that was missing? How can I improve on my OA? Simple. Like 15 सेकंड में जाके उनको ये बोल दो. I am 100% certain that you will get some important feedback that you would want to inculcate in your OA. And I think this is an important part of your OA, which most people don't like go ahead and interact with at all. So feedback is as important for you as it is for teams, and take it in good faith. Don't get defensive. Be specific about what you are asking, and be specific about whatever follow-up questions you ask. And again, when you're answering feedback, the same thing applies. Don't be defensive. Be specific about what you're answering and what the other side is asking, etc. Key principles is something you can read at your own leisure. I would say 7 to 10 minutes में आपका OA हो जाना चाहिए, उससे ऊपर जाना नहीं चाहिए. And that is including question answers. What your OA should not be a synopsis of the debate. Again, don't just summarize what happened. You don't have to like recollect it. You have to analyze it. So explain how you evaluated it and don't just replay it. People pleasing, don't be people pleasers. Don't be scared. Um, I have seen a lot of novice judges being scared. कि यार, ये तो बहुत like how do I justify my call to them? I'm so scared. Don't be scared. It's okay. The debate is already over. Be confident in your call. What the worst that will happen is that teams will disagree, and that's okay. It's part of the learning curve of judging. You will have to take the disagreement. At best, you can go ahead and ask in your feedback. कि, oh, you disagree with me. Is there something you think was missing? What do you think was missing? How can I improve? Again, um, then listing arguments without comparison. This is just an extension of the synopsis thing that like, oh, आपकी argument ये थी, इनकी argument ये थी, और ये जीत गए. Like, don't say this. Be explicit about, oh, you said this, they said this. This is how both of these things interact, and through this interaction, I'm able to derive this metric, and in this metric, op is winning or gov is winning, whatever. Give constructive feedback in the OA, and this is explicitly important for novice speakers. Novice speakers really appreciate if you have constructive feedback in the OA. So what I do traditionally is that if I know that, oh, these speakers are novice, I try to tell them, ki, okay, you make X claim, this is the mech you give me for X claim. They make Y claim, this is the mech they give me for Y claim. Their claim is better because XYZ exists. Cool. Now this is constructive feedback for you. I think your claim could have been better because of X, like ABC missing mechanization. If you were to give me this mechanization, it would have made your claim more viable, and it would have made me like convinced by you that you should win this debate, etc. So that's the way constructive feedback can happen. The same exists for impacting. Like, you can just say ki, yaar, you did not impact this claim out, so I don't know the importance of this, or you did not establish the truth value of the statement or the claim that you make. You just went ahead and gave the mechanization or impacting for it. So stuff like this enables you to go ahead and like give better OAs. Again, don't go beyond 10 minutes. Use a timer, please. Yeah, lastly, we just have common mistakes to avoid. Any questions on the last section, which was about like OA structure? We'll wait for a few seconds. Oh. Yeah. Okay, I don't see any questions. We'll take questions at the end of the session too. Don't worry. So, common mistakes to avoid: agreeing with the chair because they have rep calls, and the second is rep calls. Do not be afraid of disagreeing with someone who you think has more rep than you. It's okay. Please be confident in the calls you are giving. There are two reasons for this. One, if you flip your call, if you just give a rep call, no one will respect you. But more importantly, and this is something which I want to emphasize, judging tests your ethics in the most, I would say, scrutinizing way that debate land can do. You need to be very clear that you are here to judge fairly, you are here to give calls fairly, and if you can identify why a very reppy debater is losing and tell them that they have lost because of this reason, you need to be very like you need to not be scared of doing that. And I understand that it can be daunting, but I cannot like emphasize this further about, oh, why you should not give rep calls, because like it's just ethically wrong to do, and you need to be fair in your judging. Buying arguments without demanding analysis, counting arguments instead of weighing them, this is all something that we've gone over, so I won't like spend a lot of time on them. Left wing or political bias, this is more nuanced to understand, and the explanation for this also exists in like the previous thing that I explained at the very beginning, which when I talk about like basic morality. So just because something is right wing or left wing, it doesn't make it automatically untrue or true or whatever. You have to have some sort of analysis to it, barring objective human morality. If murder is bad, it's bad. Like, you can't just say, ki, oh, it's okay to assume murder is good. No, it's not. Um, Giving automatic lasts, there is no way that in any debate someone just automatically loses. You have to evaluate the material that they bring and not just say ki, oh, because you were not because you did not establish your motion burden and the other side established their motion burden is why you lose. No, you have to tell them ki they are more proximate to their motion button because of XYZ reasons. Then there were explicit agreements in this debate, and in those explicit agreements, how it panned out. And even if you are winning these explicit agreements, it doesn't matter because the most important thing is that you have to actually defend what the motion is telling you to defend, and this is why you are losing. But like, and then you have to like explain to them why they are losing, etc. Not responding to team after rounds, like yeah, like please be responsive to teams. And lastly, they're not reading the manual. Please read manual. Cannot stress this enough. Baki AP format judging quick reference. This is just the scale, and these are just the like I would say procedural reminders. Yeah, baad mein pad lena. This is all very obvious. And how teams will score you again. This is just on how the manual is like. This is just the scale which is copied from the manual. Both of them. Baki, remember them again. These are just key takeaways for you. You can like take a screenshot, read them right now if you want. Baki, yeah, credits. I want to give credits. Everything that is in this session and everything that I have learned is from these resources. Judging for beginners, Shireen Ali, crediting POIs as a judge, Luigi, assessing debates via keeping OAs within 7 minutes to 10 minutes, Luigi, master the art of judging an OAs, Pranav Kagalkar, judging module, Roman Marinov, UADC and WDC manuals, and obviously friends and mentors in the circuit who have taught me everything that I know, and I am at a position where I am giving workshops instead of receiving them. So yeah, credit where it's due. Thanks for joining in. I'll take questions if there are any. I think there are. I see two questions. Okay. Many times, being a trainee, teams don't really care about your OA. How to make your OA stand out and not get down out. I am so sorry that this happens, but this is a problem. Um, Teams have chair bias. Teams have panelist bias, and they are biased against trainees. They think that trainee calls are not as important or not like worth listening, or trainees don't have insight to share. I have been there and I have gotten down mark for this. I think this is not on you to stand out. It is more on teams to just be ethical people and just give you the respect as a judge. So you sat down and listened to an hour long debate. The least teams can do is sit down and listen to a 10-minute OA, regardless of whether a person is a trainee or a panelist or a chair. And what I do in rooms that I'm chairing is that I explicitly say that, guys, it doesn't like every single judge in this panel is perfectly capable of giving a 10 OA. Listen to their OA fairly. It doesn't matter what their position on the panel is. They have sat for an hour to listen to you speak. They deserve to be heard for 10 minutes. So, this is something which I do. But genuinely speaking, like it's not on you to not get down marked. At best, I think the solvency for this is that you approach equity and you approach CAs and you tell them that during my OA, teams were this XYZ, like Gov was unresponsive or Op was unresponsive. I thought that they were not paying attention. They had no questions. They did not seem interested. They were busy on their phones, whatever. You can approach equity for this, and then CAs and equity can check your scores. They can discuss with other members present in the room. They can ask the runner, "Oh, there is an issue. Um, this person says that this team was not listening to their way. Did you observe any discrepancy? Do you think that the team was paying attention?" So stuff like this. I think that's a good way for you to voice out your concern, and you should do this because equity and CAs exist, and it's their job capacity and their role to help you out. This next then it basically becomes difficult to get promoted. Yeah, so like that's the only thing I have to say for this. um I actually face great difficulty in giving my weighing in cross diagonal comparison and giving weighing to mention in OA about how we give. Wait, what? I actually face great difficulty in giving my weighing in cross diagonal comparison. So oh wait, cross diagonal comparison is for BP. Yeah, if I get into discussing how to do cross diagonal, it will take us another 15 minutes. I am so sorry that I cannot address this right now, but this is outside the scope of this session. What I can say is that it's best to use the same metrics, identify exclusivity, inexclusivity of claims from verticals, and then go ahead and identify what the exclusive claim is that you can like judge between crosses both ways, and then you make some weighing out of that. Baki to, I don't think that I can go into depth here. I'm so sorry, and we are very late. No worries, no worries. Cool. I think with that, we have come to an end of for this session. I think the presentation will be made available to you guys later on during the day, and all of the resources that I have listed in the credits, they just exist on YouTube for you to access. So just go to YouTube and type out "Judging Basics," Pranav Kagalkar, Truman Marin, or whatever. You'll find them. Um, all the best. Thank you so much for joining in. I hope you learned something. Bye bye.